What's up, my wizards? It's Dev from Mtg. We like magic, and today I got something a little bit different for you. We're going to take a look today at a deck that one of my patrons submitted for the Deck Doctor program, and it piqued my interest. Before I knew it, I was emailing him like, hey, you mind if I make this the first Deck Doctor on the channel? And he was like, let's go! So, let's go. Let's look at Naya Solemnity today. This deck is the original creation of a patron of mine named Nicholas Rausch, or perhaps Roch, the Roch, they call him. But anyway, Nick's idea was to abuse Solemnity by playing it alongside a bunch of creatures that would normally have to get -1/-1 counters, but obviously, Solemnity's out, they don't get counters, making them way better creatures for their mana cost. And I think it's a really cool idea, but honestly, the deck immediately caught my attention because I like anything that plays 4 main deck Solemnity right now. A turn 3 Solemnity on the play is really hard for energy decks to play through, and finding the right shell, and not even the right shell, finding a fun shell at least for Solemnity is of some priority for brewers, so I really wanted to spotlight this. Now here's the list that Nikki originally sent me right here, and let's run through it real quick, because some of these cards you might not recognize. There's a couple of names here that I had to look up to be like, what exactly is that? But anyway, you obviously got the 4 copies of Solemnity. No brainer, the deck is centered around the card. You want to see it as often as possible, often as early as possible. So you're going to play all 4 copies of that, duh. But let's look over the creature base real quick, starting with the 2 drops. Channeler Initiate is great because it's a low-cost creature that creates mana, which we need to fix our mana in this 3-color deck without a Tomb with Ether. Notice that. It's really dangerous, but Channeler Initiate helps out as much as she can there. And obviously, if you play it after you have a Solemnity out, you got a 2-mana 3/4, which is a decent body for the cost. Now, the other 2-drop Nick is playing is Vizier of Remedies at a 4 of, and that makes a lot of sense. It's essentially copies 5 through 8 of Solemnity for the deck, except that it doesn't interact with our opponent. You know, it doesn't keep them from putting +1/+1 counters on Long Tusk Cub, doesn't keep them from getting energy counters for whatever reason, but it does keep all of our creatures from getting -1/-1 counters. And so, I definitely support the decision for it to be in the deck. At the 3-drop slot, he's already got Solemnity, but he's also making room for 2 copies of Ronus the Indomitable, which is probably, end of the day, the single best card in the deck. Definitely the best creature in the deck, because it allows for the best turn sequences we can possibly generate alongside these 4 drops. The 4 drops being Crocodile of the Crossing and Magmaroth. I definitely think that the haste makes Crocodile the much better card here and allows for the best turn sequence in the deck. You know, it doesn't even involve Solemnity, but you go turn 3 Ronus into turn 4 Crocodile, smash face for at least 9 damage at that point. And if you've got a Vizier of Remedies out that you played second turn, well, then you're swinging in 10 damage. So that's pretty hot so early in the game, and I really like that play. But Magmaroth is still probably worth looking at, you know. I really like the interaction with Solemnity. You know, Solemnity obviously doesn't wipe its counters or anything. It doesn't wipe all the counters when it comes into play. But let's say that you play Magmaroth on turn 4, and then turn 5, you play a Solemnity on your main phase before you attack. Well, you've gotten a -1/-1 counter on your Magmaroth because you passed your upkeep, obviously, but Solemnity, considering it's a non-creature spell, will wipe that counter right off your Magmaroth. I really like that interaction, too. And even though it doesn't have haste, it'll still turn on your Ronus. And if you played Solemnity turn 3 into Magmaroth or Crocodile of the Crossing on turn 4, even though you didn't get a Ronus, that's still a really good playline too. Nick's also going with 3 copies of Manticore the Gauntlet. Definitely not the strongest creature in Standard or anything, but it's a good budget option and it is on theme, and I had to look this up and really do some digging to find the answer. But if you do have a Solemnity out, you won't get to put a -1/-1 counter on one of your creatures. That's great, but you will still get the Bolt to the Face according to Rule 608.2e, and that's very important. Nick's also got 3 cast out for removal, which does give us a dangerous amount of 4 drops, but honestly, we're looking to play our 4-drop creatures on curve. Cast out can come later a lot of games, and obviously if you're playing against Ramanap Red or the Scarab God or something and they get their big threat on curve, on the play even, then cast out is a relatively clean answer to those threats that we don't mind necessarily like skipping our turn 4 for, you know. We'd rather kill one of their dudes, exile one of their dudes, and then next turn we'll get around to Crocodile of the Crossing. It's totally fine as long as we get, you know, Hazoret off the board. So the curve looks a little bit high, and it is in this deck, but at the same time, it's not like you're going to be playing cast out on curve every game. You're mostly looking for your 4-drop creatures on curve. Nick's also playing Hepatra's Mark, which honestly, I just think Blossoming Defense is probably the much better card, but again, if you're going to stay on theme and go budget, Hepatra's Mark is pretty great. And if you don't have a Solemnity or you haven't gotten to it or Vizier that game, you might have a -1/-1 counter or 2 on a creature or two. So Hephatra's Mark can sometimes, totally negate a lightning strike or an abrade or something and make your creature even bigger, which is super awesome. A lot of times, if your creatures get down to 3 toughness when they originally started at a higher toughness, they accumulate -1/-1 counters, your opponent thinks it's safe to bolt them. But honestly, Hephatra's Mark can sometimes just be a huge blowout. Not only do I take my 2 -1/-1 counters off this guy, but your abrade doesn't count. So Hephatra's Mark is actually a great stand-in for Blossoming Defense. Now, the rest of the slots in the deck are all used on pump spells, and although I understand the logic behind using them, I do think these are some of the most cuttable slots in the deck. Nick is running Consuming Fervor, which I think is absolutely fantastic, as a matter of fact, in this deck, and it will survive the cut that I make. But I think that 1 mana for +3/+3 that it potentially never goes away is really, really good and worth the slot in the deck. As far as Unconventional Tactics and Invigorated Rampage, these are at least theoretically finishers. We got these big, fat, meaty dudes on the battlefield. Giving them trample and a huge bonus with Invigorated Rampage can sometimes get us through for that last few damage that we, again, theoretically need. And Unconventional Tactics, although we'll never get the zombie claws on it, ever, at all, a +3/+3 in flying can end the game because we just send in like an 8/8 Magmaroth and just finish things off. But I've tried a few games with this list, and honestly, I felt like first of all, pump spells go very well in a deck that goes wide, but we don't necessarily go wide. We're only running 19 creatures in the deck, so the chance that you'll have, more than one legal target and a good target for it in a given combat situation is slightly slim, and they will sit dead in your hand a little bit too much for me. Here's Nick's mana base right here. We're running 22 lands, which I didn't feel was quite adequate enough in the games I played with the deck. Now, Nick didn't send me a sideboard, so I'm going to go ahead and jump into the changes that I made to the main deck, but I'm also going to show off a sideboard for this deck too, just in case you're interested in playing it. Or Nick, I'm sure you're watching. If you're interested in a sideboard, here's some ideas too. But first of all, the changes I made to the main. Now, I didn't really make too many changes to the creature base here, I've kept nearly everything that Nick was doing, except I've gone down a Magmaroth and up a Crocodile of the Crossing. Again, I just think that that is our best play sequence, our best turn sequence that we can possibly get is turn 3 Ronus into turn 4 Crocodile. And again, we can do things like, turn 3 Solemnity into turn 3 Crocodile, but all of our best sequences leading up to turn 4 depend on turn 4 Crocodile, so I'd really, really like to see it as much as possible. Magmaroth is still good, but if we're going to play 6 4-drops, I feel like this is the right distribution. Now, as far as Manticore the Gauntlet goes, I have kept it in the deck for thematic reasons, but I just think Glorybringer is a much better card in this slot for all intents and purposes. And if you have the money or you have Glorybringers and you're interested in this deck, or Nick, again, if you're watching, you got the cash, get the Glorybringers. I know Manticore is on theme and all that. It's really, really flavorful. That's cool. It's not a terrible card, and sometimes the Bolt to the Face is really good reach on a decent body, too. So I'm not saying Manticore's bad, but we don't have any other flying creatures in the deck at all, so Glorybringer is at least a flyer, so we can block flyers and take to the skies against, other decks during stalemates, which this deck does generate its fair share of. So I feel like we need a flying creature. It's haste. That's awesome. It's really, really good with the Ronus that we're already running. There's just a million reasons to run Glorybringer in the deck, so if you got the cash, I would probably do that, but Manticore still deserves a place as far as budget options goes. Now, I'm still playing the 3 cast out that Nick played. I had the initial compulsion to go down to 2, but that was kind of a knee-jerk reaction. I was a little afraid of all the 4-drops, but I've already justified my reasons for leaving it in, Again, we're playing our 4-drop creatures on curve mostly. Cast out is a great, top deck removal piece that'll save our bacon sometimes, so I still think it deserves a 3 of, because we don't have a whole lot of other removal. And that's where a Braid comes in, Nick wasn't running this at all in the first place, and I felt like in the games I played with the deck, again, I have to qualify with that, the games I played with the deck, we are running the risk of not doing enough in the opening turns and just getting run over by a really, really fast deck, and a Braid really helps solve that problem, as well as the problem of combo decks, decks like Godfarer's Gift and other really weird combo decks that you might run into at F&M or on MTGO can really pose a problem, because they have like turn 5 and 6 wins a lot of the time, or just like Godfarer's Gift will put the game out of reach on turn 4 or 5. So having a piece like a Braid is very helpful against combo decks that don't really care about all the weird mid-rangey stuff that we're trying to do, and they shrug off our Solemnity too, a piece that's essentially more or less dead against a lot of combo decks. So for that matter, I felt like a Braid was a good way to lower the curve a little bit. The deck looked a little top-heavy at first. We need a 2-mana piece of removal that we can, just start off the game with to make sure that our opponent doesn't run away with things or get too explosive of a start that we can't overcome. I feel like a cheap piece of removal was definitely the most important thing that the deck was missing. Now, another one of the ways I used those free slots, now that we cut the pump spells, was to add a land to the deck. Again, I just didn't think 22 was quite enough. 23 feels a lot more comfortable, and sometimes I wonder if 24 is right again, especially because we're not running a Tomb with Ether or anything. Channeler helps out a little bit, but still, 23 lands even feels slightly light, but it's as low as I go. Now, even though Nick didn't submit a sideboard, I still played with a sideboard in testing this deck. So let me show you what I've got here, and Nick, if you're interested, here's a board. I went with 2 Chandra's Defeat, which is good in the Ramanap Red match, which is a particularly bad match for us, because sometimes they won't even let us develop our board. They won't let us get to our tricks, So we've got to shut them down post boards. We're already bad enough. We added the Abrade to the main, but we're still not where we want to be. So cards like Chandra's Defeat for just 1 mana can kill almost anything in that deck next to Hazoret. And that's very important. It's also decent against energy decks that run Glorybringer, because a lot of them do, especially just these straight Teamer energy lists, or run Glorybringer, and it is a ridiculously good card against us too. We're already theoretically very good in the energy matchup, but I want to take away the cards that are good against us, and Glorybringer is definitely one of them. I'm also running 2 Magma Spray just because I hate aggro that much. I really do. I freaking hate aggro so much. And it's good against the occasional, like, Sacred Cats and stuff out of, Blue-White Gift. So you'll find ways to stretch your Magma Spray, but it's very good against Ramanap Red, so we're going to play it. We're also playing Settle the Wreckage as another answer to these hardcore aggro decks. Again, we have got to find some way to run with them, and we could run Sweltering Suns, but honestly, I think Settle is a little bit better, especially considering it's one of our only really good answers outside of Cast Out for a Hazoret. But we're also running that one of Ixalan's Binding, which I favor over a 4th Cast Out, because it essentially means they can never get Hazoret again, which I like. Now, one of the things that Nicholas communicated was that he was trying to beat Control whenever possible, and that can be very tough to do with a mid-range deck. So for that reason, and that reason alone, I've included 4 copies of Rampaging Ferocidon in the sideboard here. Ferocidon is just so good against Approach of the Second Sun decks, and in my testing at least, Approach decks slaughtered us. They really don't care about anything we're trying to do, and if they can remove a threat or 2, usually they can ride it out and get to that second approach. But if we have a Ferocidon out and they can't remove it, which we're trying to make that happen, especially considering we have like a Patra's Mark in the deck, there are ways we can keep it around. Don't swing in to Settle the Wreckage, be smart about it, but still, if we have a Ferocidon out and they can't remove it, then they don't gain any life from approach. And yeah, they still can get to a second approach and win the game. But sometimes that 7 life is all it takes to keep them in the game, and if they don't get it, we win. So Rampaging Ferocidon is important for that reason, and it's good against all these random life gain decks. Some of these decks aren't even life gain decks, but they play a bunch of stuff like Legion's Landing, Sacred Cat, other life linkers too, or the Aethersphere Harvester. So you'd be surprised the amount of times that Rampaging Ferocidon can really come in handy. And finally, even though we've got a Braid main deck for the combo matchup that is good against us, by the way, we've still got Appetite for the Unnatural in the sideboard, along with Crook of Condemnation, specifically for the Godfarer's Gift match, Crook I really like against Godfarer's Gift, but you could run Scavenger Grounds if you wanted to. Totally fine with that. Sentinel Totem if you wanted to. It's really a matter of personal preference, but I like Crook the best. That's why I'm running it. As far as Appetite for the Unnatural, I'll say this, like I've said before, you could run the 4-mana thing that draws you a card and does exactly this, but I would just much rather pay 3 mana for this effect than 4. Now, before I finish up here, final suggestion. You could always just drop the red from this deck if you wanted to, and put black in instead. Abzan seems like a pretty good color combination because you get access to stuff like Omid Eternal, and Omid Eternal is ridiculously crazy in a deck like this, especially a deck like this that lacks really, really good 3-drops. We're essentially running 6 3-drops. And I don't know if that's quite enough. Something like Omid Eternal would be a really, really powerful option at the 3-drop slot. I like that idea a lot. You'd also get access to stuff like Fatal Push, which alongside Omid Eternal would really help you shore up that aggro matchup. You're essentially just lowering the curve of both your creatures and your removal if you do this. So I think that would be a really good thing to at least try. Now, ultimately, my win percentage did go up when I made these changes to the deck. I felt like there were less, dead cards in my hand at any given time. I felt like overall the curve was a little bit smoother. I felt like having the the lower end removal was really important because I didn't feel as naked against aggro decks. I felt like having the extra land was important too. Overall, the mana just felt a lot smoother in in the changed version of the deck. But if you guys have any other improvements or any ideas that you want to shoot Nick's way, let them know down there in the comment section and let me know. If there's anything that I didn't consider and you've got an idea for regarding this deck, let us know. But I'm pretty sure that's it. Tapped out for Deck Doctor number 1. Make sure, this is important, that you let me know in the comments section how you liked this one, or if you enjoyed this idea, this concept, and like the video if you enjoyed it too. That'll really let me know to do more of these. And if you're interested in getting your deck featured on one of these videos, all you got to do is hop on over to patreon.com/SBMTG. Shameless plug, sorry about that. But some people are probably interested in this. They want their deck featured and their name to get said and all that stuff. So, if you're interested in it, hop on over to patreon.com/SBMTG. Link in the description down there. And you can check it out for $10 a month, essentially. You'll get not only the $1 tier reward, which is to know what decks we're going to do the day before we do them. You'll also get the $5 reward, which is I send you a signed card every month. And I don't send trash. I send pretty decent cards if I can possibly help it. So I'm going to send you a decent signed card every month. And when you join the $10 tier, you get, the $1, the $5 tiers, and you get a Deck Doctor. That I basically email you a essentially article-long assessment of your deck, and I provide you an updated list and all that stuff. So, and at this point, now, if you enter into the $10 reward tier, then you're also essentially entered into this. You can have your deck featured on the channel. I will contact you and make sure that's cool with you before I just go doing it. So, with that in mind, if you do want your deck featured on the channel, now you know what to do. And if you're interested in either mine or Nicholas's original list, you can click the first 2 links in the description, and those will take you to our list, respectively, on TCG Player, where you can look at either one of them at your leisure. You don't need to watch this video or see me run my dumb fat mouth or any of that stuff. You can just be like, click, those are the cards on my screen right now. TCG Player helps sponsor my content. They help keep the lights on and keep the deck techs coming. So I hope you'll help them out by clicking the links, and it helps me out when you click the links too. But anyway, done for now. Like the video if you like the video. Make sure you follow me on Twitter at SBMTGDev. Do the Patreon stuff. Do the other stuff. Click the links and blah, blah, blah. In any case, I hope you did enjoy it. This was really fun for me. And I will catch you cats later. I'm Dev from SBMTG. Thanks for watching, my wizards. Spread love. Be kind.